seen the skull that shouldn't exist. They called it a mistake, a curious anomaly, a data point that simply refused to fit. At first glance, it looked ordinary enough, just a human skull-weathered, bone-white, yet tinged with the ochre of ancient soil, discolored by millennia, scarred by time's relentless erosion, a silent, hollow vessel. It offered no easy answers, no grand inscriptions carved onto its surface, no carefully prepared burial site hinting at ritual, no accompanying artifacts, no tools, no beads, no weapons to place it within a known culture. Just a skull, alone, a solitary whisper from the deep past, a fragment of existence isolated in silence. But when keen eyes, trained by years of quiet observation, looked closer, the unsettling questions began. The kind of questions that unravel certainty, the kind that keep archaeologists awake at night. Its features, despite the crushing weight of time, were unmistakably modern. A high cranial vault indicating a large, complex brain, a relatively flat facial structure, lacking the heavy, protruding brows of our archaic cousins, small, almost delicate brow ridges characteristic of Homo sapiens. The proportions, startlingly, undeniably, were ours, the echoes of ourselves staring back from prehistory. Yet the layer of earth that cradled it, the sediment matrix from which it was carefully extracted, was too old. Unfathomably, paradoxically old. Tens of thousands of years too old for such a form to exist. Too old for us to exist in that precise morphological state, in that precise geological stratum. It defied the established textbooks. It mocked the neatly drawn timelines. This skull, by all scientific consensus, by every known principle of human evolution, should not exist. It was an impossibility made tangible, a paradox in bone. But it does. It lies there, heavy in the hand, defying denial. A silent, indisputable presence. And that's when the story truly breaks. Because if this skull is true, if its impossible age and undeniable modernity are both accepted, then everything we thought we knew about us might be profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. Our origin story, our unique journey, our very place in the cosmic ballet of life. All of it, potentially, a beautifully constructed lie. A time dislocated. The story of U.S. Homo sapiens has long followed a neat, comforting arc, a trajectory of gradual, triumphant ascent, a linear progression from primordial dust to complex consciousness. Our consensus origin point, Africa, the vast ancient cradle of humanity. Approximately 300,000 years ago, perhaps earlier, the first anatomically modern humans emerged. We rose from the savannas, honed by the challenges of a dynamic continent. We learned to shape stone with exquisite precision. We mastered fire, bending its destructive power to our will. We became storytellers, weaving narratives that bound us together. Then, the great migrations began. Waves of intrepid explorers spreading from Africa, across continents, across seas. We became toolmakers, fire users, dreamers. We spread from the sun-drenched savannas to the harsh steppes, from scorching deserts to the frozen frontiers of ice. A singular journey, a singular lineage, or so we believed. But this skull does not fit into that elegant, widely accepted narrative. It is an errant note in a carefully composed symphony, a jarring discord. Its geological bed, meticulously dated, places it in an epoch far, far older than any known Homo sapiens fossil outside of Africa. Older than the established timeline of our grand exodus from the birthplace of our species. Older even than our documented emergence as a distinct, anatomically modern form. It is a ghost in the timeline, appearing too soon, too far. And yet, it is unmistakably human. Every curve, every suture, every delicate feature screams modernity. It whispers of intelligence, of speech, of conscious thought. It looks like us, a perfect echo misplaced in time. This isn't just about an inconvenient date. It's about fundamental geographical dislocation. This skull was found in the sun-bleached limestone of a European cave system. Not until tens of thousands of years later, after evolving and migrating, solidifying our hold on the planet. A place where Homo sapiens should have been a distant, impossible dream. One fossil, one silent, unyielding piece of bone, one undeniable crack in the very fabric of time as we understand it. A chronological anomaly that threatens to rewrite the very first page of our history book. Whispers from the forgotten. The discovery wasn't made by a seasoned anthropologist. No grand expedition, no academic fanfare. It began in obscurity, a humble, unnoticed moment in the deep, forgotten folds of the earth. A miner, perhaps tired, perhaps just curious, digging deep into ancient soil. His pickaxe struck something unyielding, something oddly shaped. He brought it up from the dark, the fossil covered in clinging dirt and the dust of forgotten millennia, thinking it was just another animal bone, perhaps a strange relic of a long-dead creature. He couldn't have known the weight it carried, the paradigm it would shatter. An amateur archaeologist, a local enthusiast with an eye for the unusual, took notice. Perhaps during a casual visit to the mine, perhaps a quiet tip-off, he saw something in its contours, something familiar yet unsettling. The spark of recognition, the flicker of disbelief. At first, there was a surge of quiet excitement, whispers of a groundbreaking find, a potential game-changer for human origins. The thrill of discovery, electrifying the small circle of those who saw it. Then, a profound, uncomfortable silence. The initial enthusiasm turned to hesitant doubt. The dates didn't make sense. The implications were too radical. It was too much. Museums, pillars of established knowledge, didn't want it. Its existence was disruptive, inconvenient. Institutions, guardians of the accepted narrative, dismissed it. They couldn't reconcile it with their painstakingly constructed timelines. No reputable academic journal bound by peer review and scholarly consensus would dare to touch it. It contradicted too much. Too many established truths. Too many careers built on those truths. And so the impossible artifact was quietly, discreetly boxed away, labeled simply as an anomaly, a troublesome outlier, stored in the dusty back room of history, a forgotten curiosity. Destined, it seemed, to remain a footnote, a riddle without a solution, a ghost of what might have been, the test that should never work. Decades passed. The skull sat in its box, forgotten by most, dismissed by many, waiting. Then came a new generation, one less burdened by the orthodoxies of the past. Curious, skeptical of easy answers, unafraid to challenge established dogma, armed with new technologies, sharper insights, and an unwavering drive for truth no matter how uncomfortable. A young researcher, perhaps a graduate student sifting through neglected archives, found the skull in an old, musty storeroom, amidst forgotten samples and misfiled reports. Silent presence, even in its dusty box, called to her. A faint, persistent whisper across the ages. An unsolved riddle that demanded attention. They decided to run the tests. Not just one, but multiple, using every cutting-edge method available. No stone left unturned. No margin for doubt. Carbon-14 dating, for organic remnants meticulously recalibrated for accuracy. Uranium-thorium dating, for the bone itself analyzing the decay of radioactive isotopes within the fossil. Optically stimulated luminescence, OSL, on the surrounding sediments, measuring the last time quartz grains were exposed to sunlight, effectively dating the burial context. Electron spin resonance, ESR, on tooth enamel, another independent method for cross-verification. They calibrated their instruments with painstaking precision. They retested not once but multiple times across different labs with independent teams. They verified every possible variable, every potential source of contamination or error. They sought to disprove it, to find the flaw, to return to the comfortable narrative. And yet, with each meticulous analysis, the date came back the same, too ancient, too precise, too real to be dismissed as a fluke. It wasn't contamination. There was no evidence of geological shifting that could explain it. It wasn't human error in the lab. It was a clear, unambiguous signal. It was a message across time. A truth embedded in bone and earth, defying every attempt to silence it. A silent, impossible declaration. A fracture in the story. This skull is not just a piece of bone. It is far more. It is a fracture. A deep, unsettling break in the smooth, linear story of human evolution we've so carefully constructed. A fissure running through the bedrock of our understanding. It suggests a presence before presence. A form recognizably us, when by all accounts we weren't supposed to exist in that place at that time. A ghost in the archaeological record. If this skull is truly real, if its impossible age and modern morphology are both irrefutable, then what else have we missed? What other chapters are torn from our history book? Could it be a forgotten migration? Pioneering group of Homo sapiens who ventured out far, far earlier than recorded, only to vanish without a major trace. A lost civilization, a society that blossomed and withered, leaving only this single enigmatic remnant behind. Or a ghost lineage, a distinct branch of humanity, evolving in parallel, mirroring our own development, only to disappear from the grand stage. The ground beneath us, once thought solid with established facts, is no longer certain. The foundations of our knowledge tremble. It crumbles under the immense, crushing weight of what we do not know. Under the shadow of questions we are only just beginning to articulate. And in that crumbling perhaps lies the true beginning of wisdom, a new horizon of discovery paved by paradox, the whispers of difference. The news, when it finally, hesitantly trickled out from the hushed laboratories, was met with a predictable response, an immediate, almost visceral dismissal. A mistake, they said, a fluke of geology, a misdated fragment, nothing more. The scientific establishment, built on meticulous peer review and accumulated consensus, recoiled. The geological layer could have shifted, they argued with firm conviction. Perhaps a seismic event, an ancient landslide, had caused the skull to fall from a newer, more recent stratum into an older, deeper one. Gravity, the silent accomplice, playing one of nature's cruel pranks on unsuspecting science. Maybe groundwater, percolating through millennia, had brought in contamination. Carbon from modern organic matter seeping into the ancient bone, artificially skewing the C14 results. Or perhaps some unknown exotic mineral interfering with the uranium decay. 1,000 ways for error to creep in to invalidate an inconvenient truth. And so came the first, most comforting hypothesis, a dating error. A simple, explainable flaw in the methodology easily rectified. A temporary ripple in the otherwise smooth pond of accepted knowledge. But the researchers had been meticulous. Their data, cross-verified by multiple independent labs using every method available, held firm. The date was not an error. The numbers were real. And so came the more unsettling hypothesis, a parallel branch. If the dating was indeed accurate, if the morphology was undeniably modern human, then what? Could there have been another unknown wave of Homo sapiens? A separate, precocious lineage that evolved in isolation, perhaps in a geographically distinct pocket of the world much earlier, deeper in time. A hidden stream of humanity, mirroring our own development, only to somehow silently disappear? It wouldn't be the first time humanity's family tree had shown such branching. The fossil record is replete with examples of our hominin cousins who walked the earth alongside or before our direct ancestors, yet ultimately faded into extinction. Neanderthals, robust and intelligent, who roamed Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years. The enigmatic Denisovans, known mostly from a finger bone and a tooth in a Siberian cave, whose genetic legacy still whispers in modern Asian populations. Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of Flores, a small insular species with surprising cognitive abilities. Homo naledi, found deep within South African caves, challenging our ideas of burial and symbolism. What if this skull was simply one more name to add to that silent, forgotten roster? One more branch that flourished briefly, yet never made it into the mainstream textbooks? A lineage that rose, thrived, and then vanished, leaving only this solitary, haunting remnant? And then a third whisper began to circulate among the more unconventional thinkers. A theory so outlandish it bordered on metaphysics, one that questioned not just what the skull was, but when. What if our neat, linear perception of time was the true anomaly? What if this skull wasn't an ancestor from the past, but an echo from a future so distant it became entangled with prehistory? A paradox not of evolution but of causality itself staring back from the stone. They said it was absurd. They scoffed at the very notion. But the skull didn't care what they believed. It didn't bend to their theories. It simply existed, a silent, enduring question mark in the grand narrative of time. And its very presence chipped away relentlessly at the foundations of certainty. The erased map, with the skull's impossible date confirmed, the hunt intensified. No longer just for the origin of this single, perplexing bone, but for its kin. Its echoes, its elusive fingerprints in the vast, unmarked expanse of prehistory. The search for a lost tribe, a forgotten people. Researchers, fueled by a mixture of scientific rigor and obsessive curiosity, combed through forgotten archives. Old excavation notes, meticulously penned by long-dead archaeologists, but perhaps misinterpreted at the time. Forgotten museum boxes gathering dust in climate-controlled oblivion, holding untold secrets. Dusty university storerooms filled with mislabeled specimens, awaiting a second glance, a new interpretation. They looked for patterns, for similar anomalies that had been previously dismissed. For others, skulls misplaced, misdated, misunderstood that might suddenly gain new context. The past, they knew, was littered with artifacts that didn't fit, discarded as curiosities rather than clues. And sometimes in the quiet corners of these forgotten places, they found things, whispers of incongruity. Stone tools, crafted with surprising sophistication, found in geological layers demonstrably too old for their supposed makers. art etched on cave walls deep within the earth where no anatomically modern humans should have been for millennia. Traces of organized fire pits, evidence of complex hunting strategies, where history had stubbornly written darkness and primitive ancestors. Small, enigmatic statues that hinted at symbolic thought beyond their accepted time frame. But every clue was a battlefield. Every artifact came with 100 questions, a dozen counter-arguments. Had it been misidentified? Perhaps an older hominin, but with unusual features? Misplaced during excavation, leading to incorrect dating? Planted by a hoaxer, a cruel joke played on unsuspecting scientists? The weight of established knowledge was immense, almost crushing. And yet, despite the relentless skepticism, a new map began to emerge. Not a map of continents or oceans or mountain ranges, but a map of possibility, a phantom cartography of what if, a network of maybes connecting disparate, previously dismissed findings across the globe, a constellation of what ifs, each shining a faint, tantalizing light on a hidden past, points of light hinting at forgotten populations. Each anomaly, once isolated, now seemed to draw strength from others, forming a cohesive, albeit contested narrative. What if civilization didn't begin once, with the familiar dawn of Sumer or the Nile, but many times? What if every glorious start was also a silent, agonizing end for another? A world rising only to vanish, leaving barely a whisper, a single bone behind. The history we read then would be merely the last, most fortunate iteration. Extinction of a forgotten world. So where did they go? The people of the skull, the architects of the too old tools, the artists of the impossible caves. If this human or this near-human, this advanced hominin existed, what silenced them? What erased their footprints from the sands of time? Was it a supervolcano like Toba, unleashing an apocalyptic winter that starved all life? A sudden, irreversible ice age burying their world under miles of glacial ice? A devastating pandemic sweeping through a vulnerable, isolated population before we even had words for disease, leaving no survivors? Or something else entirely? Something more subtle, more insidious? Perhaps their numbers were always few. A small, isolated group, a quiet lineage, delicately balanced on the knife edge of survival. And evolution, in its vast, indifferent sweep, is not kind to the quiet, to the few. A single environmental shift, a sudden drought, a minor competitor could have been enough. Perhaps they were hunted, not just by climate or hunger, but by chance itself, a cruel twist of fate that sealed their doom. Or a more chilling thought, by others, by rival hominin groups, perhaps even early Homo sapiens, vying for the same scarce resources in a harsh, unforgiving world. The struggle for survival, brutal and absolute. Perhaps their ultimate downfall was precisely what they didn't have, not enough weapons, not enough shared words to unite their scattered bands, not enough numbers to withstand the relentless pressures of a dynamic planet. Their very advances might have made them vulnerable, dependent on a fragile ecosystem, or perhaps the most poignant thought of all. They simply folded into us, married in, merged their distinct genetic lines with the expanding waves of Homo sapiens migrating from Africa. Their unique identity, their separate story, slowly dissolved, forgotten in the vast gene pool of our ancestors. Not extinct then, in the traditional sense, but absorbed. Their distinct existence subtly erased, a quiet genetic assimilation, leaving only a lone skull as a testament to their separate past. Whatever the cause, their world ended. Their sunset, without monuments to mark their passing, without legends to immortalize their deeds, without a single farewell whispered into the cosmic winds. And the only thing they left behind was a skull. A single, defiant witness to a history that dared to be different. A silent challenge to our comfortable assumptions. Genetic ghosts in the quiet, humming silence of the clean labs. Another question, perhaps the most urgent, was being asked. Could we extract DNA from this ancient, impossible bone? It was the obvious goal. A genetic fingerprint. A biological key that might unlock everything. Their exact relation to us, their distinct identity, their full story. The ultimate proof, etched in the helical strands of life itself. But DNA is tragically fragile. It is a delicate scroll, highly susceptible to the ravages of time. It decays rapidly, especially in conditions of heat, humidity, and the relentless march of geological millennia. The chances of finding viable ancient DNA from such an old, exposed sample were infinitesimal, almost zero. Still, scientists tried, with a tenacity born of profound curiosity. They took microscopic scrapings from the inner surfaces of the cranial vault, They isolated minute fragments of potential genetic material. They implemented the most stringent contamination controls, working in sterile environments, wearing hazmat suits, ensuring no modern human DNA could accidentally mix with the precious ancient sample. Whole labs were devoted to a sliver of possibility, a desperate gamble for a biological ghost. And then, whispers began to emerge from the hum of the sequencers. Not definitive results, not complete genomes, but tantalizing hints, partial sequences. Segments of DNA that seemed to show odd, inexplicable mutations. Fragments that simply didn't match any known Homo sapiens genome. They weren't Neanderthal, not Denisovan, not any known archaic human. Was it noise? Random degradation, genetic junk, the chaotic signature of decay? Or was it signal? A faint yet undeniable message from a lost lineage? Could these elusive sequences truly belong to the people of the skull? A genetic echo from a branch that vanished before our own story truly began? In science, they say proof is everything. Absolute, undeniable, reproducible proof. But in the realm of deep mystery, in the shadowy edges of the unknown, possibility is the potent fuel. It ignites the imagination. It drives the relentless search. And the possibility lingered, haunting the minds of those who dared to consider it. Are there parts of us deep in our intricate genome, woven into our very biological being, that come from someone we no longer consciously remember? A hidden ancestral line, a silent partner in our genetic inheritance? A ghost in our DNA whispering tales of a world that shouldn't have been? Legends of giants and first ones. It's the old stories. Every culture breathes them. Passed down through generations, across campfires under starry skies. Tales of a time before time, of others. They tell of giants, immense beings who once strode across the earth, their footsteps shaking the mountains. Of first men born from the earth or the stars, walking among early humans, teaching them secrets. Of shining beings, divine or semi-divine, who brought knowledge, built wonders, and then vanished. Every culture has its version. From the Nephilim of the Hebrew Bible, fallen angels or mighty ones of old, inhabiting the dawn of human memory, to the Anunnaki of ancient Mesopotamia, deities who descended from the heavens, shaping the earliest human civilizations, to the first people of the Aboriginal Dreamtime, ancestral beings who sang the land into existence, their spirits still echoing in the ancient landscapes. From Norse sagas of frost giants to Hindu epics of ancient sages, for centuries we called them myths, fictions, symbols representing cosmic forces or human aspirations, allegories teaching moral lessons through fantastical tales, beautiful, intricate constructs of the human imagination. But what if some of these were not merely flights of fancy? What if some were not symbols but fragmented, distorted, yet stubbornly persistent memories? Not of gods or titans or pure fantasy, but of those who came before? Of other human-like beings, perhaps anatomically distinct, perhaps culturally advanced, who walked the earth alongside or long before our direct ancestors? What if those tales of forgotten races wiped out by cataclysm or conflict? Of ancient wisdom lost to the sands of time? Of beings who vanished from the face of the earth were not fiction, were echoes, faint yet powerful vibrations of a real lived past. Fragile memories passed from mouth to mouth, across generations, losing detail with each retelling, twisting into legend. Not written in stone, for their civilizations might have been too ephemeral, too remote, but whispered in firelight, surviving against impossible odds, a ghost in the collective unconscious. And eventually, forgotten in their literal meaning, relegated to the realm of children's stories and symbolic lore. But not entirely erased, not completely lost, because one day, in a dusty, silent cave deep beneath the earth, we found a skull. A tangible, irrefutable link to an impossible past. And with its discovery, the old stories stirred. The ancient whispers gained a new, unsettling resonance. The myths began to feel less like invention, and more like deeply buried truth struggling to surface. A revelation in bone, confirming the long-forgotten whispers of giants and first ones. The sorcery of chance and the cruelty of selection. Not every path in the grand, meandering tree of evolution leads somewhere stable. Not every new branch takes root and flourishes into a sprawling canopy. Some vanish, pruned by the indifferent hand of natural selection. Some explode into a brief, brilliant burst of diversity, only to fade into the fossil record. Others linger for an agonizing while, then quietly, inevitably ebb away. Was this skull a failed experiment of nature? A brilliant yet ultimately unsustainable evolutionary spark that came too soon or was simply too different? A daring mutation that didn't find its foothold in the harsh realities of its time? In the vast, intricate lottery of survival, where the odds are stacked against every new form, pure chance holds the ultimate dice. It rolls, unseen, unaffected by merit or potential. Mutations, the very engines of change, don't ask permission before they alter a genetic code. They simply occur, random and relentless. Environments don't show mercy, they adapt or perish. They don't cater to convenience. And selection, blind and brutal, operating without bias, decides what thrives, what passes on its genes, and what dies, leaving nothing but silent stone. Perhaps this individual, the owner of the impossible skull, represented a truly brilliant deviation, a unique cognitive leap, allowing for advanced thought or language. A rare anatomical balance, perfectly suited for an environment that then abruptly changed. A specific combination of traits that, under different circumstances, might have given rise to a dominant lineage. But it just didn't catch on. The population was too small, the environmental pressures too great, a predator too effective, a disease too virulent, or perhaps simply the sheer indifferent bad luck of the universe. There was no funeral pyre for their lineage, no lasting record carved into rock or whispered into wind, just a life lived, a species risen and fallen and lost to the vast, crushing silence of time. But encoded in that one surviving bone was a divergence from the known evolutionary trajectory, a fragment of what could have been, a ghost of a different possible future for humanity, a stark reminder that our own existence is not a given, but a testament to an intricate dance of fortune and adaptation. Beyond the boundaries of modern knowledge, science, in its noble pursuit, thrives uncertainty. It seeks to define, to categorize, to explain. Subscribe to Epic Echoes, where the echoes of time never end, and the mysteries only deepen.